Could she tell us whether she intends to continue her own personal fight?
No, she's going to be the governor.
On the present structure, what a good idea.
I wouldn't worry about my own lot, Tony. I think they couldn't do any worse if they had David Beckham as their leader. I've been right about many things in my life, but I've never been wrong. Very good morning, Madam Norman Ormal, your Conservative candidate. Marvellous. And what have we here? Cheap biscuits. No guessing who's a dog lover, then. Marvellous.
He still likes ordinary people. He calls them WCs, working classes. WCs because they're dirty and you can't flush them away.
And to you, sir, very good morning, Norman Ormal, your Conservative candidate. Any problems, sir?
Yes, I worried about the pension. I mean, you know, what with this worth less than it.
Jolly good. Well, I hope I can count on your vote on Thursday, then.
As a bunny, Charlie, everyone in the party, not only myself, all the people who used to be in the house quite in the old days, they're a very slippery customer.
I am a political animal, but what type? Interesting. I think perhaps a turtle. I have a very hard shell, but I have a soft side that's really rather sweet. I'm not afraid to fight against the tide when necessary. I never bury my head in the sand, but I do bury my eggs to bear fruit when the new season comes. I'm bigger than a tortoise. Now, the tortoise might have beaten the hare, but the turtle would have beaten the tortoise, probably. Yes, a turtle.
Where there is discord, may we bring harmony.
Sir Norman Ormal is one of the great political survivors. As a Conservative minister, he served 3 prime ministers.
I've seen them come, I've seen them go, but I've always been able to spot a winner. H-E-A-T-H. A very neat handwriting you've got, Prime Minister. Well done. I was the first to spot Ted Heath, of course. Poor old Ted. Hey, Caboo! And I was a Thatcherite long before Margaret. Poor old Margaret. Now here. And I spotted the potential of John Major way before we realised he didn't have any. Poor old John. And it's now widely acknowledged that I was the very first senior Conservative to spot a future leader in the young William Hague. Poor young old William. Progress stops for no one. I was born many moons ago in 1932. I mean, no. My father was what I suppose these days would be described as a captain of industry.
Oh, he's a lovely man, old father, a real gentleman. Dad had a sweet shop.
Real?
That's right, Scruffy, you like sweets, didn't you?
My father was a remarkable man. From father I learned the value of consensus. There's no value in consensus, he'd always say. Excuse me. I regard myself as immensely privileged to have been brought up amongst these salt-of-the-earth types. It taught me an awful lot about salt and earth. Here's my old college. Gosh, and here's the old porter, Jock. Still here after, what, even 40 years? I expect you've got some pretty vivid memories of me as a student, eh, Jock? Shinning up the drain pipes in search of the fairer sex. Was I really? Good for you, Jock. Jolly well done.
I remember first opening the door of the Oxford University Conservative Club to this funny little cockney sparrow called Norman, begging to join. We beckoned him in and gave him a position of great responsibility, and I can honestly say he was extremely diligent. My shoes have never been shinier.
Julian's very old and dear friend. We're here. We're about to enter my old room. It's still very much as it was in my day. Gosh, look, even the old sofa's still here. Brings it all back. Our conservative group used to meet here and get up to all the usual student hijinks. Ludo, Scrabble, even snakes and ladders.
Though I'm sure he'll tell you otherwise, I was actually rather better at snakes and ladders than Norman.
I've the greatest respect for Swatty, but he's always had a very vivid imagination.
He was the best orator of his generation, bar none, except for perhaps one or two others who were almost as good, if not better. Much better in many ways. He was terribly overrated. I remember listening to him thinking, this is really, absolutely, whatever it is, more than likely. No doubt about it. Oops. Let's hope it doesn't stay.
It all comes back.
Some of my finest speeches were made here.
My lords, gentlemen, has this government no shame?
Have we, as a nation, lost all of our sense of self-respect? Pardon, I mean respect? What has happened to the good old British Brian? Pardon, I mean Lettish Brian, the British lion, and he's lost his paw. And I say we aren't any more the workshop of the world. Instead, he's the work stop of the world.
With an old expression in Yorkshire, if a paper bag's given you, don't place it on your head, lad. It'll only get soaked when it rains. I tell you, that's how we all felt after that momentous speech. Remind me again, lad, who are we talking about?
Wives. Well, of course, in those days, one simply applied for the central office list of approved fiancés. Now, they'd all passed the most rigorous examination.
These young women are being interviewed for the most important positions of their little lives, for they hope to be appointed wives to the up-and-coming generation of Conservative MPs. Tense, ladies?
Not at all. Dresses for the fuller figure.
Next.
The ladies undergo rigorous cross-examination, both mental and physical.
Name?
Mandy.
Next.
The Tory wife leads a stout calf. A sound name?
Audrey Ponsonby Clark.
A good head for heads. A keen interest in economics.
Everything's sixpence.
A sense of duty. Your husband has been caught having a sordid affair with a prostitute who is a known Russian spy. What would you say to me, a journalist?
Would you like a cup of tea?
Tell me, dear, where do you stand on hanging?
Under the noose?
I meant, what do you think of capital punishment?
Oh, I see.
And a jolly spirit. But for successful applicants like the Honourable Felicity Profuha, the reward is everlasting happiness.
I mean, all the girls on the central office approved list were supposed to be as pure as snow, including Felicity. Little Miss Harley Davidson.
He's not the difficultest man to live with.
Hardest.
A lot of my girlfriends say he's charming to them. It's very nice to have me. I passed out in the low 400s, so I wasn't much of a catch.
Did you spread my butter from left to right?
Yes, dear.
I always insist my toast is buttered from left to right. It's one of my little peculiarities, isn't it, dear?
Yes, dear. I really had very little to offer, Norman, apart from 15,000 acres and a house in Belgravia. And an account of Peter Jones and 80,000 a year, my own silly little self.
I do enjoy a marmalade. Felicity removes the bits for me. Some of my softer colleagues purchase their marmalades with the peely bits previously removed. I say no. One has to have someone remove the bits on site.
And then later in the year I dry them. And I make them into a lovely sort of necklace thing, which we then auction for charity. It's really rather super.
Felicity was a superlative class of lady, and my brother was a very lucky man to marry her. Don't worry, Scruffy, Daddy's not going to get married. Ever. I promise.
What attracted you to Felicity in the first place? What attracted you to Felicity in the first place? What attracted you to Felicity?
You know, I've always made a very firm principle never to answer questions of a hypothetical nature.
Would you like a cup of tea?
Good Lord. This one's new on me. It's when I first stood for the Conservatives, testing the safe Welsh Labour seat of North Mucky Valley in 1959.
Norman Ormal, your Conservative candidate.
Salt of the earth.
Charming baby.
And they took me to their hearts. You see, I made the effort to speak their language. Marvellous ordinary folk. Prepared to give you their last scraps, even if it meant doing without. I'm proud to claim many of them as my lifelong friends.
Good day to you, sir.
Now you can see the rapport.
My,
And there's Felicity. Every inch the little wife.
the lovely things over there.
You know, Felicity, it's a remarkable woman, battling with demons. They count spoons.
We always carry a little bit of North Mucky Valley around with us, close to our hearts.
Norman was convinced he'd take the seat, but sadly only a couple of hundred of the North Muckers took him to their hearts. And he lost his deposit. Bless.
He set his heart on trying to find a safer seat on which to stick his arse.
Of course, the safest seat in the country was Old Wealth-on-Sea, but that was jealously held by Felicity's father, Sir John Prafooha.
Prafooha had no intention of jacking. As senior cabinet member, he had his eyes on the top job.
It was 1963, I think, and Norman thought it would be jolly to spend the weekend with Daddy. And Norman arrived with this chum of his who I'd never met before. Lovely girl called Mandy Rice Pudding. And she was a sport. She was a good sport. And she really made a fuss of Daddy.
To this day, I have no idea how that film ended up in the hands of the newspapers. Hoo-ha. No. Sitting on England's safest seat, Sir John thought his arse was pretty comfortable. But no seat's comfortable when you've just been buggered by your own son-in-law.
Daddy never really recovered. And, he shot himself, which was really rather sad.
He fought the 64 election tooth and nail. He was always a bonny fighter. With an old saying where I come from, never help an old lady across the street, she might slice head off with machete, and he was always on the lookout for that old lady. But let's say no more about it.
In 1967, Felicity gave birth to the Ormals' only child, a daughter, Normana.
Norman insisted right from the start that it would be much better for Normana's character if she were to take an active role in politics. which was really rather super.
Fascist Tory lick-spittle! People like you don't do this! Capitalist, imperialist,
It was outrageous behaviour and wouldn't happen today, of course. Not since my Criminal Justice Act made it illegal for more than 3 students to gather together on a pavement at any one time.
I think it must have been the early 70s. Norman was doing perfectly well in the health ministry, in a general body massage-y sort of way.
As Junior Minister for Health, I wish to draw your attention to the perils that may lurk in the public playground. Take this swing, for instance. Looks pretty safe for little Normana, doesn't it? Aha! But is it? Just as I thought. Loosen the rusty screws. Now let's try this swing.
No.
Anyway, it's a certain flair for publicity, but if, of course, you think on the other end is perhaps not as statesmanlike as one would wish.
The health scare over dog food is totally unfounded. I have complete faith in the British pet food industry.
Oh, but he was simply panting to go the whole hog and get into the cabinet. Well, he told me his plan: attack a senior minister who's quite obvious a complete no-hoper and give them a thorough shafting. He had to go and shoot the wrong bloody minister. Arse.
Maggie Thatcher, milk snatcher. Maggie Thatcher, milk snatcher. Maggie Thatcher, milk snatcher.
I yield to no one in my respect for Mrs. Dennis Thatcher, but she should go back to warming her husband's slippers and leave the real politician the job of giving back to our grateful children their milk.
Maggie Thatcher, milk snatcher. Maggie Thatcher, milk snatcher.
A monumental cock-up, political. On the other hand...
And as we await the results of the Tory leadership ballot, it looks like being a close-run thing with few votes to count between Mr. Edward Heath and Mrs. Margaret Thatcher. If I may turn to you, Norman Ormal, you voted for whom?
That's quite correct. Good evening, Sue. In the Conservative Party, we traditionally remain loyal to our leader.
So you're remaining loyal to Mr. Heath?
With respect, Sue, that's not what I said. I said we remain loyal to our leader.
So Mr. Heath can't count on your loyalty?
That's not what I said. I said Mr. Heath has my undivided loyalty up until that time when he ceases to be able to command it. Mrs. Thatcher may well be a breath of fresh air.
Breath of fresh air, so you support her now, even though Mr. Heath may win through?
Forgive me, Sue. A breath of fresh air may not be necessary at this particular moment in time. Sometimes it's better to opt for air that may be a little less fresh.
What, air that's a bit fuggy? Thermostat set to what, 23, 24? No fresh air whatsoever?
I enjoy a warm room, but with a certain amount of fresh air circulating.
Extra blankets?
I'm not prepared at this stage to rule out the use of extra blankets if that's needed.
Hold on, Mr. Ormal. I'm just being informed that Margaret Thatcher has won. Mr. Ormal, your reaction?
Last we can break the stifling mugginess of the Heath era out of our system. Yeah,
but only last year, Mr. Ormal, you resigned from the cabinet, saying later, and let me quote you directly, "The bitch is mad."
No, Sue, you're quoting me out of context here. Margaret's always welcome very vigorous debate.
A little deft backtracking was in order, I fancy.
You could feel the juices running in the conference hall whenever Norman got up to speak. It was as if he'd thrown us all, ever so ruggedly, onto a big brass bed, padlocked our wrists to bedposts, covered us all in...
Labour say there's no magic answer to rising crime. Wrong, Mr. Callaghan. How do we solve crime? Just like that. Our speakers are fine enough, look, were magnificent. They were thinking the unthinkable and speaking the unspeakable. At one point even unspoke the thinkable, and believe you me, that takes guts.
My brother was a superlative speechmaker. Yes, Scruffy, so are you.
Any moron could see she had the absolute hots for him. Ain't panting for it. Lady love flattery.
Oh, Prime Minister, you really are the most beautiful woman in the world.
And believe you me, he knew all the right buttons to press. She was still only in opposition. Come the 79 election, it wasn't flattery she needed, but votes. And she asked Norman to push all those little seeds into her box.
God blimey. I was fed up with not having a job nor nothing under Labour.
Yeah, me too. There's no future nor nothing under Labour. Labour isn't working.
But there is a future under the Conservatives. A future of freedom and jobs for all.
Oh, hurrah! Certainly I was voting Conservative then.
Yeah, me too. 3 cheers for the Conservatives. Hip hip hip! Hurrah! Hip hip hip! Hurrah! Hip hip hip! Hurrah!
I actually wrote that broadcast, but
credit went where credit was due.
Ormal was one of the first to be appointed to Margaret Thatcher's new government.
The gloves are off, and this is one battle we're going to win. There's only one language that garbage like this understands, and that's the language of bullets.
As Minister for Litter.
Gotcha!
As a Womble, I have the greatest respect for our towns and our countryside. Let's all be a Womble today and conquer this litter problem for once and for all.
As a rising star of the party, he was increasingly sought out on the major issues of the moment.
So let us send a message to General Galtieri. We shall not rest until St. George's flag flies once again over South Georgia. Thank you, gentlemen.
Sure enough, the PM loved Norman's somewhat populist approach. All was forgiven. Took him to her bosom. Naughty Julian. Made him her Secretary of State for Wales. And all those poor little Welshie people were simply livid. Delicious. Dear. Ever since contesting North Mucky Valley in the 1950s, I'd always had a strong affection for the area. I really enjoyed my return. Then it gives me very great pleasure to declare this coal mine closed. No. I speak your language. You shouldn't have gone on strike.
The thing though is hated by the Welsh. Everything therefore gained the undying admiration of Margaret. Everything promoted Minister of Defence Procurement.
And I can assure you, Mr. President, British landmines are the best in the world. They will, quite literally, blow your mind.
Ormal's rise seemed unstoppable, but trouble was raising its ugly head over the apparently clear blue horizon.
Politics, it never rains, but where was I? Oh yes, the poor. It never rains on the poor. Oh, but it does. They get soaked. Who? The rich. Why? Where? When? You know, there must be a middle way. Whoops.
Well, a series of disasters, of course, personal, political, and of course, year of the slut affair. Everyone suddenly, boom.
Just 3 months after helping mastermind the election victory, the slut affair threatened to sink Ormal.
I am told they first met when she arrived at Norman Ormal's constituency surgery, asking for help with doing up her buttons at the back. And of course, next time they met, she asked for help with doing them up at the front. And later that same evening, Norman appointed her his Westminster secretary. One doesn't really like to imagine what those two got up to, does one?
These are the Conservative members of that Parliament, and these are their secretaries and political researchers. But Gaynor Slut stands out, in my memory, as the only topless typist in the House of Commons at that time.
What? In retrospect, one can see that typing wasn't of the highest standard. But, of course, the other way, very important. One thought nothing of it at the time.
Of course, one doesn't touch the Sunday tabloids, unless one really has to.
Inevitably, this kind of thing proved tremendous distraction from the government's central message.
I speak as I find. There's an old Yorkshire saying, do nought if nought's what folk wish to know, but nought do nought if nought. Aye, don't get me wrong, I've the greatest respect for Ormal, but the bugger's got to go.
Family standing by him. Also to certain amount of professional advice on how to conduct a damaged imitation exercise.
I apologise to the Prime Minister for any embarrassment I may have caused the government. I'm now embarking on a private, revitalising family holiday with my wife, Felicity Ormal. It is my resolute desire to do the honourable thing and lay this matter to rest. I have therefore concluded that the appropriate action to take under the circumstances is to stand by my long-suffering secretary, Miss Gaynor Slut, and take immediate steps to divorce my wife. Here is your ticket. Have a very, very nice holiday. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Really rather super.
My dear, forgive me, but our party's never been fond of the permanent partner. And then he began taking her aboard. I mean, she was hardly Lady Curzon.
Permanent partner, Miss Gaynor Slut.
Pleased to meet you.
Hello, mate. Oh, that's not the time.
He let us all down going off with that. No, I won't say it, but that strumpet. I said at the time he should be punished, and personally I felt like chaining him by his wrist to the wall of a dungeon. No. Whimpering sort of noises. No! While I whip him with a leather thong. And I think I spoke for the rest of the parliamentary party too.
Poor Norman, he got a lot of grief over Gaynor. I don't know why. I mean, she was a lovely girl. But I knew my brother. I knew he'd fight back.
No, Scruffy! Not you fight back, Norman! Putting the interests of my constituency members, my party, and above all my country, before my own, I have decided to make the ultimate sacrifice. At midnight tonight, I shall be returning to my wife. Thank you.
It was nothing less than a deep personal tragedy for Norman Ormal, and I always felt the very greatest sympathy. I'm so sorry, I have to do that again.
Let's say no more about it. I urge you, leave poor bugger alone. He deserves a decent period of hush, so let's say no more about it.
It was nothing less than a deep personal tragedy.
He's run off with his bit of skirt, not my time, but there we are, he's had his fun. He's gone back to his highly strung wife. They're but for the grace of God, so let's say no more about it. Give the lad a break.
I am sorry. It was nothing less than a deep person.
I mean, what can he have been thinking of running off with that bimbo, mind you, when you see his wife? But let's say no more about it. Good legs, mind, I'll give her that.
Norman had it commissioned after he came back to me. I don't really like it, so I'm afraid I never look at it.
Yes, my wife has no appreciation of fine art, but marriage is a compromise, and I tolerate her ignorance. And just look at the way the breasts seem to follow you round the room.
As the 80s went on, we were all pretty bloody pissed off and having to take it up the arse from the deserving poor. Frankly, it was high time the better off got their hand job from the Treasury. After 40 years of the so-called welfare state, we were panting for it. So, as Secretary of State for Public Funding, Norman Ormal set to work on a fair way to spread the burden of taxation more equally between the rich and the oiks. Touché. Like a bloody genius, he came up with the pool tax.
Ormal's white paper proposed shifting the entire burden of local taxation onto those households without swimming pools. The pool tax, as it became known, led to widespread rioting and civil unrest. But Ormal was unrepentant.
The community bath
No. The community bath will take the burden of taxation off the shoulders of the wealth creators in our community who've been public-spirited enough to invest in their own swimming pools. Now, the statistics clearly show that those without their own swimming pools are 98% more likely to be living on handouts, 93% more likely to take industrial action, and 100% more likely to be a lifelong burden on the state and on their fellow citizens. No, with the greatest respect to you, sir, you're a menace to society if you don't have a pool.
It was all desperately unfair. As always, the people it hit hardest were the people it hit hardest, and the people who benefited were the people it hit hardest. One felt there must surely be a middle way. I argued strongly that married couples with waterbeds, for instance, should be exempt.
Clearly the government was in trouble. A top-level resignation was required. It was my policy, so I did the only thing I could honourably do. I persuaded Geoffrey Hush to resign.
If I may, Mr. Speaker, use a cricketing analogy. I think it's very important. We realised it was a bit like being stuck in a pavilion. I was waiting. Obviously, everyone's turned the bat. Number 5 batsman is bowled out. Possibly LBW or even caught. There's time for tea. So one has to go all the way back to the pavilion. Possibly some fruit biscuits as well. Even a fruitcake.
The lady was in trouble. Now, call me old-fashioned, but loyalty has always been my greatest weakness. The lady had always supported me. Now it was my turn to support her.
Mrs. Thatcher, could I ask you to comment?
Good evening. Good evening,
Where's the microphone? It's here. This is the microphone.
Naturally very pleased that I got more than half the parliamentary party and disappointed that it's not quite enough to win on the first ballot. So I confirm it is my intention to let my name go forward for the second ballot.
The next day, she called the cabinet one by one into her private office and asked us whether she should continue.
I was one of the very few, who remained loyal to the end.
I went into that room and she was sitting there looking so very fragile.
So I went in there and I looked her straight in the eye, and she looked me straight in the eye. I said, "No, Margaret, no. The lady never looked so ravishing. Margaret, I said.
Prime Minister, oh, Prime Minister.
So bewildered, so fragile, so cornered.
We'd had our ups and downs, but she respected me, and I was respected by her.
I remember thinking, come on, Swaggy, if you don't do it now, you'll never bloody well. No. And I looked her straight in the eye, and she looked me straight in the eye.
So you won't do it?
I brought out the dust jacket for my new book. All stockings and suspenders.
We must preserve your legacy. And I looked her straight in the eye, and she looked me straight in the eye.
And I asked her whether she wanted me to autograph it for her as a going-away present.
So I pinned her to the vestibule. I clasped her trim figure in my palms, and I said, I've never said this to a Prime Minister before, but I love you. Dirty bitch. And I looked her straight in the eye. She looked me straight in the eye.
Mummy, don't go, Mum.
Yes, strictly speaking, wasn't entirely true. After a rather good lunch towards the end of 71, I said pretty much the same sort of thing to Ted Heath. I went off him in a big way. He's always perfectly ghastly yachting blazers he used to wear. So common. There's only one person who can be trusted with that legacy, Margaret. And she said, me. And I said, warm. And then Norman came out. I feel desperately sorry for her. He leapt in the air and gave me a double thumbs up. And he's over the moon. Oh, me and my big mouth. That is a tragic day for all concerned. Norman was up, little Johnny M, quicker than you get the lid off the Vic.
I certainly hope in those years to build a society of opportunity. By that I mean an open society.
Michael. But then came Black Monday. And then Brown Pants Tuesday. And then Wet Knickers Wednesday. I never forget PM coming into the room saying, bad news, gentlemen. Today's trouser-turded Thursday.
Aware of the government's unpopularity, Ormal felt it was time to make a stand.
Any comments, sir? Do you have any comments on the Prime Minister?
But almost immediately, he was to find himself at the centre of a new scandal.
All right, Mr. Ormal.
Let's say no more about it. I mean, I speak as I find. But around the same time, there were rumours. And let's say no more about it. But there were rumours that Ormal were up to his neck in corruption, in league with department store boss Mohammed Al-Bug to ask questions in Parliament. But let's say no more about it. My lips are sealed, and so should yours be, lad.
Does the Prime Minister agree that the two for the price of one cotton and polyester mix duvet and sleeping bag offer, currently available at Horsenips Department Store while stocks last, Howie, represents very real value for the British consumer? And will he himself be taking advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime, never-to-be-repeated offer in the very near future?
Yes, soon after, caught in a hotel in Venice with 3 prostitutes. It was dreadful.
In the morning, he found himself lying on top of some very crusty broadsheets. These are lies, total lies. I was actually with my daughter Normana on safari with her in a remote part of the world when these events were alleged to have occurred. Thank you, gentlemen. He had this frightfully common daughter, always blubbing. Blub, 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 blub. She'd even wake up in the middle of the night and start blubbing all over the pillow. No sooner had he threatened to issue writs against the broadsheets when the oikloids waded in with their snaps. And he could hardly crow to the courts now. They'd chop his cock off. When counsel for the prosecution produced photographs of me in the room interviewing 3 ladies, I realised that, far from coming with me to a remote part of the world, Normana must have drugged me, shipped me to a Venice hotel, and paid her mother and her 2 daughters to suck my toe, place an orange in my mouth, and slip stockings over my legs. So, I did the only honourable thing. I am presenting my daughter for arrest to be charged with kidnapping and blackmail. I expect and am hopeful that she will receive no mercy. Thank you, gentlemen.
My own daughter is in prison for 5 years.
She should have got 10!
This was the start of his rehabilitation, and was quickly followed by another astute move.
When he appeared on that show, it was as though he poured tapioca into each of their navels before spooning it off again with a deft little flick of his finger.
It was your arse, you stupid, fat, ugly prick.
Very good.
And you're a bloody pervert. Have you farted?
Very good. Very good.
Can you smell it, ladies and gentlemen? It's all you're bloody good for. I smelt it, I thought it was a bloody policy statement, you daft bastard.
Okay, finally, I wonder if you could find it in your brain power. I doubt it. If you could find out what the difference between this and this is.
All right.
That's you. You see that? You see that? That's you. And there's a pile of dogs shit there.
So the difference is...
There's no bloody difference.
Exactly.
Can you see that? What are you laughing at? Look, we're saying you like something that comes out of a dog's eye.
You like something...
There's never been a politician better at laughing at himself in public, and that's the main thing.
He had the common touch. He had his finger on the pulse, and the people loved him. At least that's what he told us, and that is why we put him in charge of election campaign in '97. I was extremely reluctant to take on the campaign. Norman had been brown-nosing John Major for the job for Youngs. And when Major finally relented, Norman was strutting around like a man with 2 cocks. I knew that John Major, I know you won't mind me saying this, was by now a gormless dead duck. I'm sure he won't mind if I say there were tears in those twerpish little eyes of his when he pleaded with me to...
This is the final nail in the coffin
of Mr. Phony Blair's ludicrous campaign to become Prime Minister.
Our health service is a national treasure, which is why the Conservatives have put more money into hospitals every year since we came to power. But if Labour win the general election, they will bankrupt your health service in months. How will they look after your elderly relatives? They won't.
Mirabel, Liberal Democrat, 1,252. Quiet, please. Ormal, Norman Frederick, Conservative, 29. Vacant, Barbara, Labour, 41,998. I hereby declare Barbara Vacant duly elected Member of Parliament for Old Wealth-on-Sea.
Thank you, Len. Thank you. Yesterday has gone and passed. Today is the day before tomorrow. Tomorrow is another day. Yesterday is 2 days away from tomorrow. Tomorrow will be today, tomorrow. And the day after tomorrow will be the day before yesterday. Thank you.
This has been a night of historic victory for Tony Blair and New Labour. And I respect the decision of the British people to swap a weak, weedy, ineffectual and common little leader for one who is strong, vital, vibrant, good-looking and public school educated. We who were in the Conservative Party must learn the lessons of defeat. We must repent for our misdeeds and beg forgiveness from an electorate who deserves so much better. I have sinned. I have sinned. But brothers and sisters, I have seen the light. Glory, 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 hallelujah. Yes, there is only one Tony Blair. He's shameless, quite shameless. And he lay there, spread eagle, bottom up, and let Tony Blair have his way.
I thought some thoughts in my time, but what the lad did doesn't bear thinking about if you think about it. This is a thought that does not deserve to be thunk.
OK, well, I'll email that through to Alice.
Normington Consultancies has been at the forefront of Millennium Dome design, right from the forefront.
Right, well. These are the escalators taking anything up to 10,000 people an hour, right up into the rear, which is interactive and fully functional. We then move up into the mind and out onto his tongue, which has a scampi on it. New, modern, exciting, the way ahead. Fresh, young, creative.
How would you best describe your father, Normana?
Complete arsehole.
I think that's very kind of Normana. An arsehole. A vital, lively, circular orifice without which the body politic would cease to function. I regard myself as tremendously privileged to be considered an arsehole, but a complete arsehole? I mean, that's marvellous. Of course, my taxi driver said to me all the way up, "Why, I hope you're going to meet a lot of pop stars." Very good.
very nice to see so many young people here.
This fucking champagne tastes like fucking piss.
Brilliant.
Actually, we're open to any item.
Yes, we are actually.
So tell me, Ringo, where are you from? From whence dost thou hail?
I'm gonna fucking puke.
Tremendous. Very cool.
Poor dear Norman. It was towards the end of the first term at university. I burst into his room, and there he was scribbling something at his boudoir. What have you there? Do show. And of course it was an envelope on the back of which he'd written a timetable of his career. And, naughty Julian, it fell into my pocket. Millionaire by the age of 25. No! Member of Parliament aged 30. No! Cabinet Minister aged 35. No! Prime Minister aged 45. No!
Why did I never become Prime Minister? Yes, it never occurred to me. I was always too loyal, too unwavering in my principles. I valued friendship above ambition. All in all, I love my country too much. I was too decent and well-rounded a man for my own good. But there we go. Do you know Tony at all? He's a very nice man. A very good Prime Minister, too, I think. I found him a surprisingly quick learner. I think this proves my career is not so much on the wane as on the wax. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Excuse me, Lord Cole. Would it be possible to have your autograph, please?
Very good. To whom shall I sign it?
If you could sign to my dear brother, Terry, kind regards, Norman, please. Well, there's a picture of us when we was nippers. Be quiet, Scruffy.
Very good.
Thank you very much, sir. What a gentleman, eh?
Look, I don't know why you want to knock Norm. He's an incredible, amazing, fantastic guy who's been prepared to give up all his deepest held beliefs for the government. And that takes a lot of courage. And I really think that the least we can do in return is to give the guy our 100% backing. Okay, fellas? Great.